Chapter 24, Portal to the Hood. R.M. Renfield is Count Dracula's deranged, fanatically devoted servant and familiar, helping him in his plan to turn Mina Harker into a vampire in return for a continuous supply of insects to consume and the promise of immortality. Wikipedia 5/15/2023. Renfield. That's a term to learn. Steve Gates was golfing on a private course in the dead of night when his phone made a particular noise and flashed a particular violet symbol on its screen, then died. When he looked up from the phone, there was a faint blue light directly ahead of him in the distance, but requiring a significant detour from the golf course. Gates swore, put up his driver, and turned on the headlights of the golf cart, motoring toward the light. There was an old service road silhouetting the trail, but deviating in certain areas for the convenience of those who used the path for maintenance. Gates drove down this road a few minutes before he saw a figure in white with a purple silhouette in front of his cart. It was Nordic Jack. "Turn off the lights," said Jack. Gates complied and tried to evince an air of indignation, but inside he was terrified, and more of that came through. What are you doing to my night game here? Now I'm going to be distracted." Nordic Jack held out a smooth object the size of a large marble. He said firmly, softly, and in a way that brooks no argument, "There are 4 names here. Get them. Contact me. You have 7 days." Gates, terrified though he was, couldn't restrain a certain impulse. "What's in it for me?" With a speed too quick to initiate even reflex, Nordic Jack grabbed the back of Steve Gates' head in one surprisingly large hand and looked straight into his eyes. Whatever he communicated was enough to cause the old tech tycoon to shriek and stumble onto his backside. Nordic Jack said, "What's in it for you is next week, and maybe the week after that." The indigo glow returned, and abruptly Nordic Jack was drawn into it until he disappeared against the sky. Above scant trees around the course, Gates abruptly perceived a dark and oblong shape, limned in blue, blotting out the stars. Then it was gone, and behind it was Orion's constellation. He stared at that constellation a second more, shaking, before letting loose with every expletive he could think of and quickly jumping into the driver's seat of his cart. In a safe room back at his estate, Gates translated the names written on the little sphere he had been given. When he was sure he had them right, he went to a secure line in the house and made a single call. "Hello? Yes, I know what time it is. Shut up. I need to talk. No. I need you to put out a Carmen Sandiego, as in where in the world, for all international..." "Hey! I was talking while you were interrupting. Was I talking while you were interrupting? Well, of course it's top priority, damn it. Wake everybody up, or so help me. Then switch gears. This is straight from the top and it supersedes everything else. What? No, 4 names, 1 week, starting, 20 minutes ago. Really? No. Ready? Kirill Konstantinovich Petrovsky, Edward Zan Fogarty, Richard Singh Patel, and Ethan Tyler Wallace. Should be 8 dossiers, but activate all ass. Is that right? Well, somehow you'll get over it!" Gates ended the call, then threw the phone at the cement floor of the safe room, hard enough to scatter it into plastic and circuitry. "If it wasn't for me, you wouldn't even have a clinic, much less a World Health Organization, you obtuse blunt force suppository." He spit. The bear that woke them was no ordinary bear. It had a craze of some kind, clouding its mind. Slinky noticed it first, hearing it scrounge in the woods down the mountain. It lumbered to the tired group of incidental adventurers in the dark. The fire had died to a few crackling embers, and the bear apparently smelled something it liked. Maybe it was jerky, maybe Carl had other food in his pack, maybe it was simply the smell of fear and sweat and fatigue mingled with that of campfire smoke, odors that would certainly be familiar to the sort of bear who raided campgrounds. Whatever the case, the odor was there, the bear was there, and the cat sprang into action, making a percussive hissing sound and growling. Carl awoke with a start and saw the shadow of the bear. Immediately he grabbed for his .45, but the cat took the initiative, ran to the animal, and scratched it on the nose. It roared and swiped at her, but missed. Thankfully, this move prompted the cat to scramble out of the way, and Carl was able to empty half his clip in the beast. Ed, Ricky, and Ethan had been swimming to consciousness when they heard the cat and the bear. The .45 brought them fully awake. Clever Ed had a shot out of the 9mm Carl gave him before he even blinked the sleep out of his eyes. He missed, but definitely confused the bear, as the handgun was much louder than its payload would lead you to believe. Here's how everyone knew this was no normal animal. Despite the ruckus, it didn't turn tail and run. To add insult to injury, the bullets seemed to have no effect. Ricky managed to squeeze off a few bursts from the sonic weapon. They impacted the bear like invisible fists, pummeling rounded hollows into the animal's chest and causing it to rear up on its hind legs if unsteadily. It didn't cry out in pain, it cried out in rage. Thankfully, Ricky managed to send a shot right into the animal's face, crunching its skull. A rictus took the bear suddenly, and it fell to the forest floor of the mountain, twitching in the flickering light of the dying fire. There seemed to be a suggestion of green about the predator, but it was hard to tell. Ethan had barely managed to find his own sonic weapon by the time it was all over. Now he sat blinking, too groggy to be properly afraid, but nonetheless confused. Carl got up and checked the vanquished grizzly. "Good shot, Ricky," he said, crouching down and pulling an eyelid back on the beast. "This bear, he is not lacking food. This is not normal." Clever Ed's hair and mustache were going odd directions. He stumbled in bow-legged fashion to the dead animal, crouching down and squinting. Then, remembering he still had Carl's flashlight on the end of the 9mm, he activated it and walked around the carcass. "Can't say I disagree with you, fella," he said at last, looking up at Carl. "Well, I ain't tired now. Maybe we ought to get out of the woods and see what's in town, eh?" "What time is it?" Ethan stifled a yawn. Ed looked at his watch, looked at the sky, and said, "Well, it sure as hell isn't 2 in the afternoon, but it's dark and we're in Canada, and Carl said it's the middle of summer, so I'm going to say between 11 at night and 4 in the morning. Let's see. If I look at the star, no, late, let's see, 3-ish, maybe?" "Yes," Carl said, following his skyward, starward gaze. "Oh," added the cat. Her kittens had scattered when she hissed and ran at the bear. Now they were appearing from everywhere, coming closer and mewling. It took a few moments, but soon all 9 were back around their mum. Maybe it has not really been 2 years," said Ricky. The accent that came through betrayed his uncertainty. Clever Ed shook his head. "Well, it's been months if it hasn't been years, and we were only wherever we were most of the day, not months. I don't think Carl here is lying to us. It was 20 below when we zapped out of Siberia. There's no way it would be this warm in any northern mountains if it hasn't been a few months. And there aren't any bears like that south of the equator, so we're definitely at a northern latitude. Probably like Carl said, Banff, plus a year or so." "Fair point," said Ricky. Ethan stifled another yawn. "It's like Carl said, fam. Trust it. Isn't that weird place for real, like? I've been in and out a few times. It probably hasn't even been 2 minutes since we left. They're still scrambling to find us." "No," said Carl. "They know we are gone. Maybe not business as usual now, but they know. Now we must be very careful. That bear, I think, yes, animals get possessed. If there is an anchor point, they find it. Maybe this dead bear, he has eaten tourist. Maybe not. But he had an anchor point." "Wait a minute, you're saying the whole forest is out to get us?" Clever Ed sounded more irritated than afraid. "No, just animals who have anchor point. The bad eggs," Ethan clarified. "Yes, just as not all men are good anchors, not all animals are. But there are many men we must watch for." "The boys from A," Clever Ed nodded. "Ah, yes." Ricky had gathered all his things and repositioned his coat. "So what do we do? If it's been 2 years, then it is very, very likely, very unlikely, our old assets are still accessible." "Yeah," Ed nodded. "Not the traditional ones anyway. If you remember, they were going to blow up our flight from Russia. That is right? Ricky's eyebrows knit together. The Aikmen were Rufus and Chip-Tooth Skeeter. They wouldn't have sent guys in a team, then additionally detonated an airplane for nothing. Still, I happen to know people at the top have, what's the right word, relationships. Relationships with agencies like ACHE, so who knows. Maybe it was just some sort of overkill strategy. It is how they work, agreed Carl. It's an MO, all right. Ed ran a hand through his hair. So if we do make it in town, they're going to come after us if we are recognized, but we won't be recognized. That said, we're going to need to get food, some kind of cover, and we're going to need to get money. We could eat the bear, Carl suggested. Yeesh, I hope it's not that bad. Ethan stood, still processing his rude awakening, and stashed the unused sonic firearm in his pants, pulling the ends of his hoodie over his fingers. After a stretch, he said, I might be able to help. How? Clever Ed looked skeptical. Crypto, fam. I ain't got a lot, about like 6,000 in U.S. currency worth, but I did before I left. I just need to find like a computer lab, and I've got a secure email account I can use to give my crypto wallet key. Ricky's eyebrows raised. You keep your crypto wallet just lounging about in your inbox waiting for hackers. No, I use a skip code, ELS. It's hidden in a cloud server's system file index. I configured it all for an old client. Figured it might come in handy. The email just helps me find my way to it. I need like 20 minutes on a computer and a pen. I can get that wallet key, but how trendy is Banff, everybody? Think they got like a Bitcoin ATM? Sure they do, Ricky answered. Just check the convenience stores. You making an Indian joke or are you serious? Ed chuckled a bit. Before Ricky could answer, he turned to Ethan. So how do we get on the internet? Anyone got a phone? Ethan felt all over his person, realizing he had left his phone in the room he was renting from Carl the day the buck woke him up and he went gambling. Carl didn't have a phone. Ed and Ricky had told of their woes in Russia, how they got divested themselves of their own devices to avoid being tracked. Ethan looked up at the sky again. We get in a hotel, we can just use the courtesy computer near the check-in desk. That ought to work legit. Carl nodded. Okay, follow me. He strode across the dying embers of the fire, stamping them out in the process, and out to the naked hillside with melting snow. In the distance down the hill, the faint lights of a sleepy town could be seen. It is... Carl, oh darn it. Okay, follow me. This is Carl. It is that way. Nearby is a big hotel, like a castle. It is close. We get in there. Then, to town. And breakfast, Clever Ed added, and maybe a drink or six. During the course of their travels, Clever Ed and Ricky had come to the conclusion that whatever was going on between dimensions, between worlds, it couldn't just be let alone. A phenomenon, a genuine phenomenon, was at play here. They had been ostensibly killed by their own government, or 8 people running their government, or something worse. They would need Carl to get to the bottom of it. Carl needed to save the one he loved, and there would be a way to save more than one if Clever Ed had anything to say about it. He'd begun to grow a resolve. Ethan still wanted to save the red-headed femme fatale who'd started the trouble, though he seemed increasingly dazed. At some point he realized, as much as he wanted to be the hero, if they were going to have any chance of saving her, he had to remember that to a certain extent he was a junior in this expedition. It took them several hours to make their way through the underbrush to the Fairmont Banff Springs, which did indeed appear to be some sort of wild castle more than a hotel in the middle of Canadian wilderness. The trip was only mildly treacherous, and except for one tenacious chipmunk that made a fine snack for Slinky, they didn't see any more wildlife along the way. That said, it was dark. Maybe it was the desperate energy of all 4 men, but each felt he could see better than he ever had. Each man was entirely alert. Wrangling the cats along the way wasn't as terrible a challenge as Ethan had expected. Slinky followed behind Carl obediently, and the kittens followed her. Everyone else made sure the cats stayed ahead and none fell behind. They spoke about many things along the way, and by the end of this short journey, they had all decided their course. They would continue. They would rescue the abducted if they could, but they had to find a place to plan safely first. Dawn was breaking as they reached the hotel that was a castle, and it bathed intricate architecture in an unreal glow that looked like something from another world, from perhaps the world they had come from, not Earth. But then Banff, Canada was full of unique architecture that felt like something transplanted out the heart of Switzerland. Ethan digested the image of the hotel and the sun, appreciating it subconsciously, but on a spiritual level. Then he took off his hoodie and the bulletproof vest he had been wearing over it. He had a t-shirt with a faded band logo beneath. As such, he appeared to be the most touristy of the bunch. Ricky, Carl, and Ed meandered about the exterior grounds of the hotel in the meantime. Ethan made his way into the lobby and returned about 15 minutes later with a series of letters and code words written on a slip of paper. They traveled into Banff proper and clandestinely checked all the gas stations, finding one with a crypto ATM to the south of town, down a street only one over from where they'd entered. Banff was just waking up. There were few people about and only the occasional car. Ethan was able to withdraw $3,848 US, which came out to $5,153.73 in Canadian currency. His crypto holdings had dropped nearly 40%. Ultimately, he was more relieved than he expected to withdraw such a sum. They had money now, and he wouldn't lose any more on Bitcoin. Maybe it would bounce back, but despite the hoopla, Ethan had never trusted cryptocurrencies. It was a little past 7 in the morning by the time he had the money. Before getting food, Ricky ascertained from the convenience store clerk that there was a glorified hostel called the Banff International that sometimes had 4 bunk beds to a room and was under $100 a night in Canadian currency. As he was talking in the store, Ethan said, "No cap, I thought it was just San Fran that had the Indian 7-Elevens. Indians are shrewd. Hotels, gas stations, they're dependable for business everywhere," Ed observed. Ricky emerged from the convenience store. "A mile down Banff Avenue, it'll be on our left. They are hotels. They'll just take our money and give us a room key. We stay hidden." "What did I tell you?" Ed winked at Ethan. "Nice work, Ricky." It was another 20 minutes to the motel, then 10 minutes as they checked in under false names and a $50 bribe to the desk clerk. Their room had 4 bunk beds, a toilet, a shower, and not much else. They managed to get a room near the end of the building, hidden from the street with a man-sized window facing an alley they could use in a pinch. It was a Monday, or they might not have been so lucky. The next tourist wave would start arriving on Wednesday, or so the clerk at the front desk informed them. The room didn't allow pets, but obviously this restriction was roundly ignored by all 4 men. After they checked in, Ricky took a grocery list to an overpriced grocery outlet, picking up breakfast, several bottles of Canadian whiskey, a new harness and leash for Slinky. Ethan had lost the original during their excursion through the world of madness, and 3 backpacks, one of which would serve as a mobile cat carrier for the kittens. Ricky was also sure to pick up several bags of beef jerky for the cats, as well as several other more traditional sorts of cat food. When he got back to the hotel room, they all ate what canned food he had retrieved with no small amount of greed. It was mostly corned beef hash. And Ed filled a flask that had been secreted about his person with the whiskey Ricky bought. And Ed filled a flask that had been secreted about his person with the whiskey Ricky brought. It had barely been topped off before he helped himself to several nips, then offered the thin liquor receptacle around. Everyone was eager to get a sip. They were able to breathe for a moment and refocus their minds. Clever Ed had the idea Ethan might do well to have internet access, and so Ricky went out again and picked up a used computer from an Apple store in town. Banff was a tourist destination for the world, and as such had all the amenities of a large city packed into a compact conglomeration of streets occupying only several square miles. This was good and bad. It was good in that they could get things they needed which wouldn't be available in most communities of similar size. It was bad in that it meant there would definitely be people hunting for them among the tourists. Since Ricky was the least visible of the 4 of them, looking more stereotypical than he himself realized, by consensus it was determined that he would be the safest bet to pick things up in varying stores. He kept his hair short, his face clean shaven, and his body was in average shape. Ricky was Ricky and his own person. However, he definitely could have disappeared in a crowd of his relatives. By 10 in the morning, they had a little over $3,000 in Canadian currency left, but were set up much better than they had been. At length, Ed said, "Ethan, we're going to get you paid. We're going to get you paid back. I've got resources in the States. I can fall on those resources, but I've got a serious question." "Shoot, fam." "You mentioned servers earlier, and you did an ELS skip code, equidistant letter sequencing, if I'm not making a mistake?" "Yeah, so you're a computer guy. How familiar are you with the deep web?" "I know a thing or two about a thing or two," he replied. "We're going to need a Canadian coyote, you understand?" "A wolf?" "No, a smuggler." traffickers down south. They call them coyotes. That's going to be our best way back to the U.S. if we're staying hidden. There will be ache people, Carl interrupted abruptly. Ed looked over his shoulder. Much evil is in the buying and selling of human beings. Of course, dark spirit energies. They are thick with those kinds of things. The coyotes. Maybe not every man. 9 out of 10. Fair point, Clever Ed muttered. He turned back to Ethan. Well, see if you can find somebody and get us some fake IDs for 3K Canadian. Maybe you throw in that computer we bought. Then we'll, I don't know, steal a car or something. See what you can find. Can do, fam, Ethan acknowledged. Thanks. Ricky, help me out, and I want to hear some ideas when we get back. Where are you going? Carl wants to be out of earshot of any tech. Everybody nodded. Ed and Carl left Ethan and Ricky to the dark web and went for a walk along an adjacent forested path. When they had made it a certain distance along the path to the woods, well clear of any human infrastructure, Clever Ed said, "It's been most of a day. What are we waiting for? Your cat's got to be cooled off by now." "It's not that," Carl said. "What is it?" Carl pulled out the map and turned it over. On the back, he'd listed what information he'd been able to gather on varying portals. He'd numbered them and put the corresponding digits on the other side of the document. "The problem is where they come out. To stay here, we thread needle. We go in at one point, come out in another here. I know 5 points inside, 20 kilometers, 10 miles, but look," he showed Ed the map. "See, they are all high up in the tower. See number 227. That is the foyer, the entryway, the antechamber where will be the women that must be saved. That one is in Wyoming. It is near Devil's Tower in the boulders. And it is hard exit. Exit portal back here. From there, it comes out in a great empty desert. Could be Gobi, could be Sahara. It is not North America. It is not South America. There is a portal more near though. I go to the desert, I find the other portal. It comes out near the tree where was the motorbike I hid. I would have driven to the trail on the hill after. In the chamber, to the desert, to the tree. Here. But, and you're telling me all these portals are one way? Yes, once open they are one way. They can be opened from either place. You cannot go back once you go through unless a portal is closed and then opened. I do not know what happens to you if you try to go against this, but it is not good. What makes you think it's so bad? I used to try and live myself things. Food, what is worth? Mementos. Anything I threw in from real world, back the way I come, instead of forward to next portal, or instead of closing and reopening portal. Whatever goes behind, I never see it again. Could be a time thing, Clever Ed muttered. It could be many things, but it is a thing we must be respecting. You really lost all that eloquence, eh? It is a fog without mind water. I can almost see the words, but man, it's weird. So let me get this straight. You're saying the portal you need is in the USA. The ones here are too dangerous. Yes. Well, man, we got time now? What, 2 minutes a day? We could spend a month planning. Your girl loses an hour. No, maybe. I prepare many years. Now it is all in the air. We gotta figure out how deep we're in, Ed muttered. What time is it? He looked at his watch, which he had reset in the hotel. 1 o'clock. We're mountain time out here, right? We're mountain? Probably. I'm gonna go find a payphone and make a few calls. Ed, with the little cats. What about the little cats? I do not know a place. I know a place far out in the woods, but near a trail. Comes out across from the tower. Not my hill. Across. Comes out the opposite your hill on one of the mountain ridges of the empty lake with the alien base. Yes. So, there is second entry. Very near that. We go through. We get to a place. We maybe see how the little cats can shift. But what? It comes out in Detroit. Detroit? Well, it's better than Portland. That is other portal near here into US. About 100 miles though. Is on top of mountain. Ed nodded. True, I guess I can work with Detroit. Now I think about it. I've got options. You get me to Detroit, I can get us 100 grand yesterday. We got informants and dealers up and down that city. I'm sure it wasn't turned around since we was away. I'll just shake one of the guys down and we can shift out of there. We'll get you a girl, Carl. In fact, we'll get them all. But we can't shift out of Detroit. How's that? I know one portal in, nearest one. I don't know. Last time I was there, only a few years after I lost Genevieve. Had to take a bus back to South Dakota. Well, Ed said, exhaling then. Well, I can work with that. I've got some ideas, but first I got to make a few calls. I got to sort out a last resort. I've got a last resort, and you know, I can't think of a better time to call it in. So I'll meet you back at the hotel inside a half hour. Okay. And Carl returned to the hotel room. He busied himself arraying towels inside one of the backpacks for the kittens. Slinky couldn't be happier to be in an enclosed room that was safe. She was always underfoot and had become used to those who weren't Carl, at least more used to them than she had been. The kittens were having a fine time jumping between bunk beds and hiding in whatever little dark areas they could find, blending into darkness with midnight black silky fur. Ricky and Ethan were trading ideas on the used computer. It was logged onto a very weak Wi-Fi signal from the hotel hostel flophouse. Meanwhile, Ed found the payphone he'd spied on their way in that morning. It was secluded, and he could see if anyone were sneaking up on him. He made 6 phone calls under an assumed name and tried several code phrases. 3 of the numbers didn't work. 1 went to a machine, but the second to last call was a public line. It had a number of automated responses he was able to cycle through. He only needed to know about his particular office in D.C. and whether his extension was still in the system. It was not. And the name of the man who now had Ed's old extension was a definite rival. Clever Ed felt a deep sinking in the pit of his stomach as the reality of their situation enveloped him. But at least he now knew for sure how things were. There had indeed been a hit out on him, and by extension Ricky, and 2 years had indeed passed. Unwillingly, but knowing it was the best move, he called the last number he could, and winced when someone picked up the phone by the 15th ring. Hello? Amber, don't hang up. It's Ed. The other end was silent for a heartbeat, then, this isn't funny. Yeah, I agree. How did you get this number? That alone ought to tell you it's me, babe. More silence, but this silence had a different emotional flavor, if that's even possible. Ed could almost see what her face was doing through the phone line. Finally, she managed to say, It is you. Yeah. You're not dead? No. The government contacted me and everything. That's why I called the emergency burner. Honestly hoped you weren't still keeping it charged. I'm glad you did, obviously. Ed, don't do this to me. Look, you're going to have to get rid of this phone when I hang up, and we only got about 20 more seconds. I wouldn't call unless I had no choice. I know. Well, she was quiet a full 3 seconds before resignedly saying, You know where I am. It'll be a few days. And Ed hung up the phone on his ex-wife, red as a beet, and breathing hard. That little call had him shaking more than their entire adventure in the crazy world. He had to sit down on a bench near the phone, and he fished out the flask he had filled that morning, taking several greedy gulps before shakily replacing it in his coat pocket. Abruptly, he looked at the sky. Well, God, I promised! Promised I'd make it right. And you brought me out of the green hell, so I'm going to do it. This didn't make him feel much better, though, and his head hung between his legs for a minute or two, almost independent of his will. Finally, Ed managed to stand up, wiping his eyes and turning to head back to the hotel. At that particular moment, he saw something he shouldn't have. It was a black SUV backing into a parking spot right across from their room, like a dragon at the womb. Bastards, if I've ever seen bastards, Ed muttered under his breath. He ran around to the back of the hotel and banged on the window that gave on the alley from their room. Carl used a gun to ease back the curtain, saw Ed, pulled the string to open the drapes, and slid the window to the side. Immediately he understood the situation, clarifying with, "Out front." "Yeah." "Okay. Ethan, get the cats in the bag. Ricky, you found the harness for Slinky." "Yes, sir," and Ricky produced it from a paper sack. Carl attached it to the cat. Everybody picked up quick. Inside 3 minutes, they were ripping the screen off the window and jumping over the edge to the outside. Ethan had the backpack with the kittens. Carl had the original pack and all that was in it. Ricky handed Ed a pack with additional provisions and whiskey, then put on his own with similar items. When they were in the alley, Carl said, "Which way were they?" Ed pointed down and around the corner. "Okay," said Carl. "This way." He put Slinky on his right shoulder and gripped the leash looped back around behind the pack with his left hand. His right hand held the .45. They went up and down a number of alleyways until they came to the edge of town. Carl stopped and consulted his map once, then they continued. In another hour they'd found the next portal, and Slinky gave them no trouble opening it. It took Ricky and Clever Ed a few more seconds to decide to walk through it than was perhaps convenient, but eventually they looked at each other. They both had the idea to pray. They prayed in their heads, and they stepped through. This entry opened on a high empty hillside miles from the Conch Ziggurat and at a notable elevation. Still, the tower could be seen, like a massive inverse cyclone in the center of a wide crater, though there should have been an orderly line of polygons gently drifting into the mirrored opening of the Conch Ziggurat. Instead, there was a great cloud of them about the structure, a line of traffic spiraling around and around. Even from such a distance, it could be seen that the inhuman compound was in an uproar. In the time of this place, it had only been a little over 2 minutes since they disappeared. Maybe the word was out in the real world, but returning to routine would take time here. Carl led them down the hill a good 40 feet and positioned the cat amid the heather and flowers. A portal soon opened on a neighborhood in the afternoon where nature had reclaimed a number of abandoned residential properties built 80 years ago. All four made their way quickly through, and Carl walked the cat behind a decrepit structure that was once beautiful brick but had become a burnt-out husk. Slinky quickly vomited, and Carl comforted her until the portal was fully closed, then gave her some jerky and unhooked her leash. Ethan brought the bag with the kittens, and she jumped in when he opened it, licking the heads of the little ones. He quickly zipped it closed, but for a small ventilation hole. Only a few gunshots could be heard in the distance. It was a quiet afternoon by Detroit standards. Clever Ed said, "All right, we're in business."